I'll never forget the moment I realized I was nothing to them. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where the air feels heavy with routine, and I was setting the table for a family dinner at my house. My husband, Tom, was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, while I was arranging plates, folding napkins, and making sure the lasagna I'd spent 3 hours perfecting was just right. This wasn't just any dinner. It was supposed to be a warm-up for my mother-in-law's big 60th birthday celebration, the one I'd been planning for weeks. I'd poured my heart into it, booking the venue, curating the menu, even designing custom invitations with her favorite flowers on them. I wanted it to be perfect, not just for her, but for the whole family. For us. Then the phone rang. It was my sister-in-law, Karen, her voice clipped and cold, like she was reading from a script. "Hey, just a heads up," she said. No warmth, no hesitation. "We've decided to move Mom's birthday dinner to my place instead. You don't need to worry about it anymore." I stood there, clutching the phone, my mouth dry. "Wait, what? Why?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. Karen sighed, like I was an inconvenience. "It's just easier this way. Mom prefers it. No big deal." No big deal? I'd spent weeks, months, making sure every detail was flawless. I'd called vendors, negotiated prices, even stayed up late to handwrite place cards because my mother-in-law once said she loved calligraphy. And now, with one phone call, I was erased. I pressed her. "Karen, I've already booked everything. The deposits are paid. What's going on?" There was a pause, the kind that feels like a blade hovering. Then she said it. "Look, it's a family thing. We just want it to be intimate. You get it. Intimate." That word hit me like a slap. I wasn't family. After 8 years of marriage, after hosting every holiday, cooking every Sunday dinner, and being the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, I wasn't family. I felt my chest tighten, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone. "So I'm not invited?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen didn't even flinch. "It's not like that. It's just, less complicated without you." And then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the lasagna cooling on the counter, the table half set, and something inside me broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way. No, it was quieter, sharper, like a glass cracking under pressure. Tom walked in, oblivious, and asked why I looked so pale. I told him what happened, expecting him to be as outraged as I was. But he just shrugged. Shrugged. "They probably didn't mean it like that," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Don't make a big deal out of it? My own husband, the man who vowed to stand by me, was dismissing me just like they did. I looked at him, searching for a flicker of loyalty. But there was nothing. Just indifference. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw things. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the wall, and let the hurt settle into something else, something colder, harder. They thought they could push me out, erase my place in this family, and I'd just take it. They thought I'd smile and nod, like I always had, because that's what I did. I was the reliable one, the one who made things work, who kept the peace. But not this time. This time they'd gone too far. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. And as I lay in bed, the plan started forming, quiet and precise, like a storm gathering on the horizon. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't confront Tom or call Karen back to beg for an explanation. Instead, I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and started reviewing everything I'd done for the birthday dinner. The venue contract, the catering order, the florist's invoice. It was all in my name, paid for with my credit card. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd assumed I'd still foot the bill for their intimate celebration. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. I canceled every single arrangement that morning. The venue, canceled. The caterer, canceled. The florist, the photographer, the string quartet I'd hired because my mother-in-law loved classical music, all gone. I was polite but firm, citing unforeseen circumstances. By noon, the entire event was a ghost. I didn't stop there. I called the bakery that was making the custom cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece I'd designed with my mother-in-law's favorite flavors, and told them to halt production. "But it's already half done," the baker protested. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steady. "The event's off." I didn't feel sorry. Not one bit. Then I texted Karen, short and sweet. "Since you're handling Mom's birthday now, I've canceled all my arrangements. Good luck!" I hit send and turned off my phone. Let them scramble. Let them figure out how to throw a party with no venue, no food, no cake, no nothing. They wanted to exclude me? Fine. I'd exclude them right back. For the next few days, I went about my life like nothing had happened. I cooked dinner, went to work, smiled at Tom when he mumbled about his day. But inside, I was watching, waiting. I knew the fallout was coming. Karen called me 2 days later, her voice a mix of panic and accusation. "What the hell did you do?" she demanded. "The venue just told us the booking's gone. The caterer won't answer our calls." I kept my tone calm, almost sweet. "I told you, Karen. You said you wanted to handle it." So I stepped back. "Isn't that what you wanted?" She sputtered, trying to guilt trip me. "This is Mom's 60th. How could you be so selfish?" Selfish. The word stung, but it didn't break me. "I'm just respecting your decision to keep it intimate," I said, and hung up. Tom was next. He came home that night, his face red, his voice raised. "My mom's freaking out because her birthday's ruined. Why would you cancel everything?" I looked at him, my husband, the man who was supposed to have my back, and I didn't flinch. "I was told I wasn't family, Tom. Why would I pay? For a party I'm not invited to?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he knew he had no defense. For the first time in years, I saw him squirm. Good. The family group chat exploded after that. My brother-in-law chimed in, calling me petty. My mother-in-law sent a long message about how disappointed she was in. I'll never forget the moment I walked into my mother-in-law's house, arms full of groceries I'd spent hours picking out, only to hear her say, "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to come to the birthday dinner." Her voice was sharp, like she was doing me a favor by cutting me out. The room went quiet. My husband, Tom, sitting there with his family, didn't say a word. Not one. I stood there frozen, the weight of those bags pulling at my arms, while her words sliced through me. Excluded. From a dinner I'd been planning for weeks. For her. Let me back up. I'm not one for drama, but I need to tell you how I got here, because this wasn't just about a dinner. This was years of being pushed to the side, years of swallowing my pride, years of pretending I didn't notice the way Tom's family treated me like I didn't belong. I married Tom 8 years ago, and from the start, I tried to fit in. His mom, Linda, runs the show. She's the kind of person who smiles to your face, but makes sure you know your place. I'd show up to family events with homemade pies. I'd remember everyone's birthdays. I'd even help clean up after Thanksgiving while the rest of them sipped wine and laughed. I thought that's what you do when you join a family. You show up. You contribute. You prove you're one of them. For years, I poured my heart into making Linda like me. I'd call her to check in, ask about her garden, listen to her stories about Tom's childhood even though I'd heard them a dozen times. I planned her 60th birthday party, rented out a venue, hired a caterer, made sure every detail was perfect. She loved being the center of attention, and I made it happen. Tom told me I was amazing for it. But Linda? She never said thank you, not once. Instead, she'd drop little comments. "Oh, you're so busy with your job. I'm surprised you had time for this." Or, "Tom always loved my cooking growing up, but I guess your style is different." It was never outright hostile, but it was enough to make me feel small. I kept going, though. I thought if I just tried harder, she'd see me as family. So when her 65th birthday started creeping up, I got to work. I spent weeks planning a dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant. I called ahead to reserve the private room, worked with the chef to create a custom menu, even designed little place cards for the table. I was excited. This was going to be perfect. I told Tom every detail, and he'd nod and say, "Sounds great, babe." I thought we were on the same page. I thought he had my back. Then came that day. I'd spent the morning at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for a cake I was going to bake for the party. Linda loves chocolate, so I was going all out. 3 layers, homemade frosting, the works. I figured I'd drop the groceries off at her house, go over some final details, and head home to start baking. When I got there, the whole family was already gathered in the living room. Tom, his sister Claire, her husband, their kids, even Linda's cousins who I barely knew. They were all there, laughing, talking about the dinner I'd planned, the dinner I wasn't invited to. I stood in the doorway, bags in my hands, trying to process what I'd just heard. Linda looked at me, her smile tight, and repeated herself. "We didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy, and we wanted it to be just family. This time, just family." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. I wasn't family, after everything I'd done, after 8 years of showing up, of biting my tongue, of trying to be what they wanted. I looked at Tom, waiting for him to say something, anything. He just stared at the floor, his hands in his pockets. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I felt my face burn, not with anger yet, but with shame. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I wanted to scream, to throw the groceries on the floor and tell them exactly what I thought of their family. But I didn't. I took a deep breath, set the bags on the counter, and said, "I see. Well, I'll let you all get back to it." My voice was steady, but inside, I was shaking. Linda's smile widened, like she'd won something. Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. And Tom? He mumbled, "I'll call you later," as I walked out the door. I drove home in a daze, replaying every moment of that conversation. The way Linda's voice had that fake sweetness. The way no one, not even my own husband, stood up for me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the shame was gone. It was replaced by something else, something cold and sharp. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was done playing their game. They thought they could push me out and I'd just take it? They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the groceries still unpacked, and started thinking. I'd spent years trying to win them over, but what had that gotten me? Nothing but a front row seat to their disrespect. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. but I wasn't going to let that anger spill out in some messy outburst. No, I was going to be smarter than that. I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could treat me like I didn't matter. The first thing I did was cancel the reservation at the restaurant. I called the manager, apologized for the short notice, and told him we wouldn't be needing the private room after all. He was confused, but didn't ask too many questions. I hung up the phone and felt a tiny spark of satisfaction. Linda had no idea her perfect birthday dinner was already falling apart. She thought she was in control, that she'd gotten rid of me without a fight. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I kept my distance. Tom called, leaving voicemails, about how he didn't know they were going to exclude me, how he was sorry but didn't want to make a scene. I didn't call him back. I wasn't ready to talk to him. Not yet. I needed space to figure out my next move. I started going through old emails, text messages, anything that might give me insight into how Linda operated. I'd always noticed how she manipulated situations, pitting people against each other, playing the victim when it suited her. But I'd never paid close attention before. Now, I was watching her every move. One thing stood out. Linda loved being the center of attention. But she was careless. She'd send group texts about family events, leaving me out but accidentally including me in the chain. She'd post photos on social media, tagging everyone except me, then act surprised when I mentioned it. It was all so deliberate, but she played it off like she was just forgetful. I started saving those messages, those posts. I didn't know exactly how I'd use them yet, but I knew they were important. They were proof. Proof that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was who she was. I also started talking to people outside the family, friends, co-workers, even Tom's old high school buddy who'd always been kind to me. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to get a sense of how Linda was perceived by others. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd felt her sting. Tom's friend told me about how Linda had once forgotten to invite his wife to a family barbecue, then made it seem like it was the wife's fault for not showing up. Another friend mentioned how Linda would brag about her kids but never mention me, even when I'd helped with something big, like organizing her anniversary party. The more I heard, the clearer it became. Linda wasn't just thoughtless. She was calculated. And she'd been doing this to me for years. By the end of that week, I had a plan. It wasn't fully formed yet, but the pieces were coming together. I wasn't going to confront her. That would be too easy, and she'd just turn it around on me. I wasn't going to fight with Tom either, not until I was ready. Instead, I was going to let Linda's own actions catch up with her. She wanted a birthday dinner without me? Fine. I'd make sure it was a night she'd never forget. As I sat there, plotting, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you're one step ahead. Linda thought she'd won by cutting me out. She had no idea I was already rewriting the story, and when I was done, she'd wish she'd never underestimated me. The days after I walked out of Linda's house were strange, like I was living in someone else's life. I'd wake up, make coffee, go to work. But it all felt mechanical. My mind was somewhere else, replaying that moment in her living room, the way her words cut through me, the way Tom just sat there. I wasn't sleeping much. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. Not with sadness, though. That's what surprised me. I wasn't crying or falling apart. I was angry, but it was a focused kind of anger, the kind that makes you sharp, not sloppy. I kept thinking about how Linda had played me for years, how I'd let her. And I kept coming back to one thing. I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not at first. I didn't want pity, and I definitely didn't want advice. You know how people are. They'd say, just talk to her, or don't let it get to you. But this wasn't something a conversation could fix. This was bigger than that. So I kept it to myself, let it simmer. I went to work, smiled at my coworkers, nodded along when they asked how my weekend was. But inside I was building something. A plan. A way to take back what was mine. Not just the dinner, but my dignity. Tom kept calling, leaving voicemails that sounded more guilty than sorry. I should have said something, he'd say, or, I didn't know Mom was going to do that. I listened to them, but I didn't call back. I wasn't ready to deal with him. He'd had his chance to stand up for me, and he chose silence. That told me everything I needed to know. For now, I needed space to focus. Linda was the one who'd drawn the line in the sand, so she was the one I was going to deal with first. Meanwhile, Linda was acting like nothing happened. She posted on social media about her upcoming birthday, all smiley selfies and captions like, "So excited for my special day with my favorite people." I wasn't tagged, of course. Neither was Tom, which was interesting. She was curating her perfect little narrative, and I was nowhere in it. I saved those posts, added them to the folder I'd started on my laptop. Every snub, every accidental exclusion, every passive-aggressive comment she'd made over the years, I was collecting them like ammunition. I wasn't sure how I'd use them yet, but I knew they'd come in handy. The restaurant cancellation was just the first step. I'd done it quietly, and no one had noticed yet. Linda was still talking about the dinner like it was happening, probably imagining herself at the head of the table, basking in everyone's attention. I let her keep that illusion. I wanted her to feel safe, to think she'd gotten away with cutting me out. That's when people slip up, when they're too comfortable. And Linda was already slipping. She'd started texting the family group chat, making plans for the dinner, tossing out ideas for what to wear, what time to meet. I was still in the chat, though I hadn't said a word. She didn't even bother to remove me. That was her first mistake. I started paying closer attention to the family dynamics. Claire, Tom's sister, was Linda's golden child, always jumping in to agree with whatever her mom said. Claire had never been outright rude to me, but she'd never gone out of her way to be kind either. She'd laugh off Linda's comments about my cooking or my job like they were just jokes. But I saw through it now. Claire wasn't neutral. She was complicit. Then there were the cousins, who mostly followed Linda's lead, and Claire's husband, who stayed out of everything. And Tom, my husband, who I'd always thought would have my back, but who'd proven he'd rather keep the peace than defend me. The more I watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about Linda. This was a whole system, and I'd been on the outside of it from the start. About a week after the incident, I got a call from the restaurant. The manager, Tony, wanted to confirm the cancellation, just to make sure there wasn't a mistake. I told him it was intentional, thanked him for checking, and hung up. But that call got me thinking. The restaurant was a small, family-owned place, and I'd built a good relationship with the staff while planning the dinner. I decided to pay them a visit. I told myself it was to apologize in person for the last-minute cancellation, but deep down, I knew I was looking for something. Maybe an ally. Maybe just a way to keep the momentum going. When I got there, Tony was behind the bar, wiping down glasses. He recognized me right away and waved me over. "I was sorry to hear about the cancellation," he said. "We were looking forward to hosting you all." I smiled, thanked him, and started explaining that there'd been a change of plans. I didn't go into details, but Tony was sharp. He picked up on my tone, the way I hesitated when I mentioned Linda's name. "Family stuff, huh?" he said, raising an eyebrow. I just nodded, and he chuckled. "I've got a mother-in-law, too. They can be a lot." We talked for a while, and I found myself opening up more than I'd planned. Not about the exclusion, but about how much work I'd put into the dinner, how I'd wanted it to be perfect. Tony listened, then leaned in and said, "You know, people like that, ones who take credit for other people's work, they always trip over their own egos eventually." His words stuck with me. Linda wasn't just excluding me. She was taking credit for my effort, acting like the dinner was her idea. That's when I realized I wasn't just going to cancel her plans. I was going to make sure everyone knew what she'd done. I left the restaurant with a new idea. Tony had mentioned that the private room was still available for Linda's birthday, and they'd had another inquiry about it. I asked him to hold off on booking it for anyone else, just for a few days. He agreed, no questions asked. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that information yet, but it felt like a piece of the puzzle. I was starting to see how I could turn Linda's own game against her. She wanted attention? I'd give her attention, just not the kind she was expecting. Back home, I kept digging. I went through old emails from Linda, looking for patterns. There were plenty. She'd often send me instructions for family events, like I was her personal assistant, then forget to thank me or include me in the praise afterward. I found one email from 2 years ago when I'd organized a family reunion. She'd written, "Make sure the tables are set by 5 p.m. and don't forget the extra chairs. No, please. No, thank you." And when the reunion was a hit, she'd posted online about how we all pulled together as a family without mentioning me once. I saved that email, along with others like it. They were small, but they added up. They showed who she was. I also started talking to more people outside the family. I called up an old friend, Sarah, who'd known Tom and me since college. Sarah had met Linda a few times and never liked her. "She's got that mean girl energy," Sarah said over coffee one afternoon. "Always smiling, but you can tell she's keeping score." I told Sarah about the dinner, and her jaw dropped. She said, "What? And Tom didn't do anything?" I shook my head, and she leaned forward. "You need to do something. Not for her, but for you. Show them you're not invisible." Sarah's words lit a fire in me. She was right. I wasn't doing this just to get back at Linda. I was doing it to prove something to myself. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. And for what? To be told I wasn't family? I was done with that. I was going to take control, and I was going to do it my way. That's when I started reaching out to other people in the family, but not the ones in Linda's inner circle. I called her cousin Diane, who'd always been a bit of an outsider herself. Diane lived a few hours away and didn't come to many family events, but she'd always been kind to me. I told her I was just checking in, catching up. We talked for an hour, and she mentioned how Linda had stopped inviting her to things after she'd disagreed with her about something trivial years ago. "She doesn't like anyone who doesn't play her game," Diane said. I filed that away. Diane wasn't just a potential ally. She was proof that Linda's tactics weren't new. She'd been pushing people out for years. I also reached out to Tom's old friend, Mike, the one who'd told me about his wife's experience with Linda. Mike was happy to hear from me, and we met up for drinks. He didn't know about the dinner yet, but when I told him, he wasn't surprised. "That's Linda," he said. "She's got to be the queen bee, and if you don't bow down, you're out." He told me about other people Linda had sidelined over the years. Friends, neighbors, even her own sister at one point. The more I heard, the more I realized this wasn't personal. It was just how Linda operated. But that didn't make it okay. It just made me more determined. By now, Linda's birthday was a few days away, and she was in full planning mode. She'd sent out a new group text, confirming the time and place for the dinner. Except, of course, there was no reservation. I could have let it go at that. Let her show up to an empty restaurant and deal with the embarrassment. But that wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt. I wanted her to know what it's like to be left out, to be invisible, so I kept working. I called Tony at the restaurant again and asked if he could do me a favor. I told him I wanted to book the private room for the same night as Linda's birthday, but under a different name. I said it was for a work event. Nothing big, just a small gathering. He didn't ask too many questions, just said he'd make it happen. I thanked him and hung up, my heart racing. This was risky, but it felt right. I was going to take that space, her space, and make it mine. Then, I started reaching out to people I trusted. Not the family, but friends, co-workers, people who'd known me for years, and who'd seen how hard I'd worked to fit in with Tom's family. I invited them to a special event at the restaurant on Linda's birthday. I didn't tell them the whole story, just that it was a night to celebrate something important. They were excited, and I started to feel a little lighter. These were my people, the ones who'd always had my back, and now they were going to help me take it back. As the day got closer, I could feel the tension building. Linda was still posting about her birthday, still acting like everything was perfect. Tom was still leaving voicemails, sounding more desperate now. "We need to talk," he'd say. "I don't want this to ruin us." I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. I had a job to do, and I wasn't going to let anything distract me. The night before the dinner, I sat down at my kitchen table and went over everything. The restaurant was booked under my name. My friends were coming. Linda had no idea her plans were about to fall apart. I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement, like I was standing on the edge of something big. I didn't know exactly how it would play out, but I knew one thing for sure. Linda was about to learn that I wasn't someone you could just push aside. Tomorrow was going to be a night she'd never forget, and I was going to make sure of it. The morning of Linda's birthday, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. My plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. I wasn't nervous anymore, just focused. I'd spent so long trying to be what Linda wanted, trying to fit into her world, but today wasn't about her. It was about me. It was about taking back the respect I'd earned, the place I deserved. I got dressed, picked out something sharp, but understated, a black dress that made me feel powerful, and headed to the restaurant early. I wanted to be there when it all went down. Tony, the manager, greeted me at the door. The private room was set up exactly how I'd asked. Tables arranged for my group, candles flickering, a playlist I'd chosen playing softly in the background. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant, intentional. My friends started arriving. Sarah, Mike, a few coworkers who'd become like family over the years. They didn't know the full story, but they knew this night mattered to me. Sarah hugged me and whispered, "Whatever you're up to, I'm here for it." I smiled, grateful for her trust. By 6 p.m., the room was full, laughter and conversation spilling out into the hallway. It felt warm, real, like a celebration of something bigger than a birthday. It was a celebration of me reclaiming my voice. Meanwhile, I knew Linda and her crew were on their way. I'd seen her latest group text, gushing about how perfect the night was going to be. She had no idea the restaurant had no record of her reservation. I'd made sure of that. Tony had my back. He'd told his staff to handle any inquiries about Linda's booking with a polite, "I'm sorry, we don't have anything under that name." I didn't want to be cruel, but I wanted her to feel that moment of confusion, that sinking realization that her carefully curated plans were unraveling. Around 6:30, I got a text from Diane, Linda's cousin. She wasn't coming to my event. She lived too far. But I'd asked her to keep me posted if anything interesting happened. Her message was short. They just got to the restaurant. Linda's freaking out. No reservation. I didn't respond, but I could picture it. Linda at the host stand, her smile tightening, her voice getting that sharp edge as she insisted there must be a mistake. Claire probably chiming in, Tom standing there, useless as ever. I didn't feel glee, exactly, but I felt satisfied. This was the first crack in her perfect facade. Tony slipped into the private room a few minutes later, his expression neutral, but his eyes twinkling. Your, other party is here, he said quietly. They're at the front, trying to figure things out. Want me to do anything? I shook my head. Just let them sort it out, I said. But maybe let them know the private room's booked. He nodded and left, and I turned back to my friends, who were passing around appetizers and swapping stories. I didn't need to be out there watching Linda's meltdown. I already knew how it would play out. What I didn't expect was for Linda to walk into the private room. About 10 minutes later, the door swung open, and there she was. Her face a mix of confusion and barely concealed rage. The room went quiet, my friends looking from her to me, sensing the tension. Linda's eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I thought she might say something cutting like she always did. But then she saw the setup, the tables, the candles, my friends laughing, the space she'd thought was hers. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she couldn't find the words. Is there something you need, Linda? I asked, my voice calm, but firm. I stayed seated, my hands folded in my lap. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a fight. She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. This was supposed to be my dinner, she stammered. I booked this room months ago. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Did you? Because I booked it for tonight. For my friends. You're welcome to join us if you'd like. The offer hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. I knew she wouldn't take it. Linda didn't share the spotlight. She thrived on controlling it. My friends stayed quiet, but I could feel their support, their eyes on her, waiting to see what she'd do. Linda's face flushed, and she muttered something about a mix-up before turning and walking out. The door closed behind her, and Sarah let out a low whistle. That was intense, she said, and the room erupted in laughter, the tension breaking, like a wave. I didn't laugh. I just took a sip of my wine and let the moment sink in. Diane texted me again later. They're leaving. Linda's blaming the restaurant. Tom looks miserable. I didn't respond to that one either. I was too busy enjoying my night. My friends didn't ask too many questions. They didn't need to. They could tell this was about more than a party. We ate, we talked, we toasted to new beginnings. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The next day, the fallout started. Linda posted a vague rant on social media about unreliable businesses and disappointing birthdays, but she didn't mention me. She couldn't. Not without admitting she'd tried to exclude me. Claire called me, her voice shaky, asking why I hadn't told them the reservation was canceled. I didn't bother explaining. You were there when Linda said I wasn't invited, I said. What did you expect me to do? She didn't have an answer for that. Tom showed up at our house that night, looking like he hadn't slept. He tried to apologize again, but I cut him off. "You made your choice," I told him. "Now I'm making mine." I didn't kick him out, not yet, but I made it clear things weren't going back to how they were. Over the next few weeks, I kept moving forward. I started spending more time with people who actually valued me. Sarah, Mike, Diane, my coworkers. I even reached out to Linda's sister, who I'd learned had been sidelined years ago for standing up to her. We met for coffee, and she told me stories that sounded so familiar. Linda's need for control, her subtle cruelty, her ability to make you feel like you were the problem. It was validating, but it also made me realize I didn't need validation anymore. I knew the truth, and I'd proven it. Linda's birthday became a kind of legend among my friends. They'd joke about the dinner that wasn't, but for me, it was more than a story. It was the moment I stopped letting other people define my worth. I didn't need Linda's approval, or Tom's, or anyone's. I had my own table now, and I got to choose who sat at it. As for Linda, she never mentioned the dinner again. She still posts her perfect family photos, but I notice they get fewer likes these days. Some of the cousins have started reaching out to me directly, inviting me to things without going through her. Claire's been quieter, like she's rethinking her role in all this. And Tom? He's trying to make things right, but I'm not sure if he can. I'm not the same person I was before that day in Linda's living room. I'm stronger, surer, and I'm not going back. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Linda thought she could push me out and I'd just disappear. Instead, I took her moment and made it mine. She taught me something valuable, though. You don't win by playing someone else's game. You win by changing the rules. And that's exactly what I did.